Welcome to MySecurityTV and our Tech and Sec Weekly. My name's Chris Cubbage. I'm the editor with MySecurity Media. And today we're joined in person finally by Casey Ellis, the Chief Strategy Officer with Bugcrowd. Casey, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, we're in Surrey Hills, Surrey Hills.
Surrey Hills.
Surrey Hills here in Sydney. So welcome back home.
Thank you.
And I think we've got you just before you fly out.
Yeah. It's a quick kind of whistle-stop trip. This one came down for a wedding and doing meetings and whatnot for the front end of the week, then back home on Thursday. So.
Great. And we're in the offices of one of your investors as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're here in the Blackbird offices. Blackbird was one of the first investors in Bugcrowd. We actually started life in the StartMate accelerator program, which is coupled with Blackbird, and that was kind of our origin story. So it's very cool to be back here.
And look, I feel quite privileged as well to have you on. This is literally on the back of your $102 million raise and US dollars as well.
Yep. $156 million dues, I think is what that converts to from what I heard.
Nice. And look, most of the audience, and we saw the socials as well, you've really got a good, strong support, particularly here in Australia with the Australian cybersecurity community.
Yep.
But now international and speaking to the new CEO as well.
Yep.
How this will change the business. And I had a good quote I mentioned to you off camera is raising money is not necessarily a success, it's now an obligation. And it's a pretty big obligation now.
100%.
But it's a fascinating story, and that's what we're going to dive into in this particular session. So thanks for joining us.
Sounds good. Thank you.
I'm tempted to go back, where did we start? But I think let's just talk about the round and what this means for the business for 2024, so the audience can keep an eye out for what they should expect. Yeah,
for sure. So I founded the company in 2012. We've been going now for 12 years. And I think to me, the thing that's most significant about this round, aside from its size, it's a large financing in that sense. General Catalyst is a partner. They're the third largest VC in the world. Phenomenal partner, from an execution track record standpoint, and they're a serious player. To me, what that does is it validates not just the category that we pioneered. I think we're at a point now where people in general understand that cybersecurity is a team sport, and it's a fundamentally creative problem that we're trying to solve here. We actually do need this army of allies to outsmart the army of adversaries, especially as technology accelerates. So it's validation of the fact that that's a mainstream thing now, which is cool. But the other side of it, obviously, and all credit goes to everyone in the team, Dave and everyone who's come in over the past period of time and all of that. Bugcrowd's execution against that market has been phenomenal over the past 18 months, and there's recognition of that as well.
Well, Dave definitely we've interviewed him a couple of times now, and he really picked up the ball and knows the business. He's been fundamentally. He really is an impressive individual.
I fully agree.
But you've also got some new board members coming on, and sort of ex-Akamai, so they understand the industry and where they need to take this business, and the I suppose not just the scale, but the scale of the opportunity.
The scale of the problem, the scale of the opportunity that's created by that problem. And I think, the track record experience that Paul Sagan, who you're referring to, has, he was CEO of Akamai for a number of years, and he's done a whole bunch of stuff. That guy's resume is frightening. What he does is he brings in a context of the market, how to execute into that market, what it means to different people. The role of a board member is really governance and input, in the sense of what advice can we actually draw from someone like Paul to execute better, and then how do we have the right people in that board to be able to govern the decisions that we're making as a team as we go forward. So to have that kind of caliber come on board, and Mark Crane obviously is awesome as well. He's the partner from GC, phenomenal futurist. He's just, I enjoy just sitting down and jamming with that guy, because he's got the kind of same seeing around corners, head on his shoulders that I like to think that I have. So, between his conversations and me, and obviously he's got a similar thing that he gets going with Dave as well. So there's a lot of fun. Just
having Mark and Paul join the board, one of the quotes I grabbed from you when we did the briefing following the raise is you feel quite fortunate to be part of a team, and it is quite a unique team now. We mentioned Dave, Mark, Paul, and with yourself now. How are you guys working together? How do you find what's the magic between the four? And obviously, there's a lot more in the team, but
and there's others.
Find you come down to a core group.
I mean, there's the board, there's the C-level executives within the company, there's the executive leadership team, then there's the operational leadership team, and then there's kind of everyone. That's kind of how we've got it structured. And I think it's a blend of having those kind of components that we've got to actually govern and run the company being clear, so that everyone knows their job and all those different things. That's got to be tight, otherwise it gets messy. And I say that from experience in startup days, right? Like the first 20 people, you don't have that, and you start to build it, and you got to figure it all out. And obviously, we're well past that at this point. I think on a practical level, it's just there's a really strong culture within the organization. There's everyone's in the same boat. Like everyone's to blame. Everyone's there to be praised when a thing goes right, and we're all kind of doing it together. So what that does is it fosters this environment of intellectual safety and intellectual honesty, humility, and we can just work on things and get them solved really quickly because of that environment. That's always been, I think, a key kind of leadership principle that I've had. I think unity within a team is actually one of the most important things to protect. And Dave's very much on that same page. So the minute he came in, I started collaborating with him in that role through my position as founder, like helping him understand, what's the alarm code and all those different pieces that you got to do when you're spinning up in that role. And that continues forward to today. So it's a combination of structure and I think just those like cultural key principles, making sure that those are set. And the other thing that's nice about that is if anything ever goes off track, you can identify it and pat it back in pretty quickly. Like things don't need to continue off down a bad track and catch on fire to get solved. You can actually do it on the fly.
Well, I think that's kind of where I was going too, and how you've described that is because one, you've been around your longevity now, and this is your sixth raise, and we will come to the platform. Why? What is? Sure. I'm sure that there might be one or two people in the audience who may not have heard of Bugcrowd or don't quite understand what it's actually doing. But when you think about Bugcrowd and the crowdsourcing community versus how you run the company on the inside, which is kind of opposite of how that is. How that culture is sort of the centre part of that, because that does sort of bring us back to what Bugcrowd is and your core. The sixth round, coming up to 10 years or 8 years?
12.
12 years, I knew it was around.
Which is weird. It feels like yesterday and a million years ago all at once from my seat. But 12 years.
So having that continuity through and what this round means, maybe just let's explain Bugcrowd now, and even if whatever might be new or different since you did found it.
Yeah, for sure. So at its core, what Bugcrowd is a platform that connects people that think like bad guys but aren't, with folk that need to understand where risks might exist within their organization so they can fix those things before the actual bad guys come along and exploit them for real. It was kind of built off the concept of bug bounties. My backstory heading into this, I grew up hacking things. I did pen testing before I went across into sales, did a stint as a CISO and then broke bad and became an entrepreneur. The role of the hacker community, hacking in and of itself, I think traditionally has been seen as always a bad thing. So if you're a hacker, you're automatically evil and you need to be afraid. That's never actually been true. That's just what people thought. So, objective one for Bugcrowd was to change that perception in the market so that we can create a better operating environment for people that hack in good faith to actually be a part of the solution. And then in terms of what we've built, it's literally connecting that vast pool of creativity and resourcing that's out there with problems that exist that need to be solved in a way that maximizes the success for both sides. So like not every hacker can solve every problem, and not every problem requires this individual or that one. Really what we've done from a platform standpoint is to build out, the way I like to describe it, it's basically Match.com for people that break computers. So we've got all of this data on our crowd. We understand what their skills are, what their technology backstory is, like what they don't like, all those different things. And when we start off with a new customer, part of what we do is understand like what do you actually need? Like how do you best define the problems that you're trying to solve? That goes into the engine, it creates matches and kind of off it all goes from there. So the bulk of what we do right now is really breaking into stuff, essentially to tell people how it might happen. Bug bounty is a core way that's expressed in the market. Vulnerability disclosure programs are another, and that's an area that I've been pretty active with and that the company's been very forward on from a policy standpoint. Recently we've been really pushing hard into the pen test market, because that's actually kind of where I came from. It's like pen testing is a thing that's been around for a really long time now. It hasn't evolved or improved at all in that period, and the user is kind of paying the price for that. So how do we create a competitive advantage for defenders to better protect their shareholders and their users, and actually bring the crowd in as a part of how we solve that problem? So that's kind of the core of what we do.
It comes back to what you talked about before in terms of cybersecurity as a team sport.
Yeah.
The skill sets required. Do you think it's a natural evolution that you've gone into the pen testing and the services side
100%.
as a company? You need to work with the client a bit closer?
Yeah, I think the big thing, to me, the pen testing market was actually the market that I most wanted to disrupt originally.
Yeah.
We used bug bounty as a term of art to get the market comfortable with hackers. And then in the middle of all of that, the Pentagon comes out and announces they're doing Hack the Pentagon and so on. And bug bounty as a standalone way to solve problems kind of caught a tailwind at that point.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that we were waylaid by that, but it definitely became more about this sort of net new idea instead of trying to disrupt something that already exists. The pen test industry now is like $4 or $5 billion globally. And those are existing budget line items that we can do an objectively better job at serving from an ROI standpoint. Whereas with bug bounty, it tends to be greenfields, kind of net new.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I think we're kind of returning back to the core of what we were doing, which is what I was explaining before. We often get referred to as a bug bounty platform or a bug bounty platform category. And I kind of like that, but it bugs me at the same time because the internet doesn't have a bug bounty problem.
Yeah.
It's got a problem with outsmarting bad guys at scale, right?
Absolutely.
Which is ultimately what we're here to solve.
And that brings in the AI side, because obviously 12 years that technology has evolved rapidly, and we're in we're in a practically brand new era as what we've seen in the last sort of 12, 18 months with OpenAI and the like, and I think the adoption of AI by enterprise and corporates.
Yeah.
That creates a new market in its own right.
Yep.
Maybe explain not just how you're using AI in the business, but when companies come to you and go, hey, we're using AI platforms,
how can Bugcrowd help us secure that? Yeah, 100%. And that's a really good way to pass it out, because Bugcrowd's been using what I just described with the matching engine. That's NLP, machine learning, and things that most people would refer to as AI. So it's we're not strangers to using this tech to do what we do.
Yeah.
We've definitely gotten more taps on the shoulder to help people secure it since ChatGPT dropped. I feel like that was the moment where the internet kind of collectively had this I get it now moment when it comes to AI. Because the reality is we've been interacting with this stuff for decades. We just haven't had
it hasn't been talking back to us.
Yeah, we haven't been able to put our hands on it in the same way, and that happened to everyone all at the same time about 18 months ago. So that drives a whole lot of things. But from a practical standpoint, there's the policy level. We helped write the AI executive order out of Joe Biden's office and the White House. There's a whole bunch of different kind of areas from a policy and a strategy standpoint where it's like, what does AI security even mean? Like, how do we as legislators think about this and make the voting population more confident in the safety of it as it goes forward? So that's not necessarily what we're doing as a product, but that's a big part of how we've been kind of seeing around the hill or seeing over the hill on this one. Practically, we're hacking on all sorts of different things. I think, the CDAO bounty out of the Pentagon is something that we just kicked off recently. That's an AI bias testing engagement. Yeah. So like the Biden EO actually mandated red teaming for LLMs against bias. No one really knows how to do that yet, but they all know that it's a problem that they need to solve. So we partnered up with the Pentagon to actually develop those programs. That's an example. Helping hackers build tooling out of AI and become more effective in how they actually do their thing, like regardless of what it is. It's not just attacking AI. We see hunters using AI to become more effective at web application testing or like testing against IoT systems, because it's just this new automation tool that they've got available to help them be. It's like the Iron Man suit. You know what I mean? Like Tony Stark without the suit is weaker than he could be. The suit without Tony Stark is less creative than it needs to be. You put them together and all of a sudden amazing things happen. That's a lot of what we're doing on that side as well.
Where are the skill sets changing as well?
That's a really, I get asked this a lot. It's fascinating because I think the thing, like one of the big step function shifts over the past 18 months with generative AI is that you don't have to be a programmer. There's people doing computery stuff that are just using natural language to get it done. And what that does is it basically lowers the bar of entry and actually engages a far wider variety of skill sets. So we see people coming into doing AI testing proper that are incredibly effective, that come from like a social engineering background, or even people that are like literary arts students, or folks that come in from sales or whatever else. They understand how to talk to things and get an outcome, and they're just kind of porting that across to an LLM being on the other side of that conversation. So it's really interesting watching that space evolve. There's obviously the PhD crowd and folks that have been working on this stuff for a really long time. Like we've got a big cohort of that type of person as well. But what I'm more interested in as it evolves is where are the funnels for actually growing out this community going to come from? Because we're going to need a lot of people. Like AI is not going away, and it's a broad thing that we need to address. So logically, we're going to need to build that crowd.
With that crowd, are there key partners that you have? You talked about PhDs and the like. Are you doing advanced research with partners, or are you finding, again, from a corporate perspective, you bring that back in-house?
Yeah, elements of both. Like there's things that we keep inside the tent that are kind of proprietary in that sense. But from an external partnership standpoint, like we've done a lot of work with the AI Village out of DEF CON, CDAO and the Pentagon, Department of Defense. They're kind of a partner in how we're all figuring this out and delivering value back to them. We've got a partnership with Conductor AI, who are like an AI security platform to basically work with the crowd to be able to do different things. That's continuing to kind of grow out over time. But yeah, that entire space, we're in a really good position to address it, and that's reflected by the customers that we've got at this point, like OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, the Pentagon. Like clearly there's evidence that we can do this well. But at the same time, it's still very early days. I think actually defining what this all means and how we continue to evolve to it as it evolves, that's something that everyone's trying to get the answer to.
And I think that explains the $102 million investment.
That's a big part
to
of
say,
it.
Look, we don't know how big this is, but the opportunity is huge. Let's just put $100 million
and we know
on the
it's
table.
not, and we know it's not going away. I think the other thing to call out there is that this is not Bugcrowd's first rodeo at dealing with new tech. Like, IoT security, which we do a lot in, that wasn't a topic in 2012, 2013. Do you know what I mean? Like we built out our approach and our platform to be able to be ready for this new thing to come over the hill so that we could address it. When it did, we did. And off it went from there. Like we did a bug bash for a telco, when was that, about a month ago. We were hacking on industrial technology and like 5G, like radio and backbone and all that kind of stuff. It really kind of doesn't matter. Like we've set up what we do to be flexible to whatever comes over the hill next. And AI is just in some ways another thing. I think it's extraordinary. I don't want to diminish it, right? But in other ways, it's just another technology that we have to figure out how to secure.
Well, even things like spatial computing coming through now with Apple Vision Pro and the like, of how that may well change. You're the chief strategy officer. That's not fair, because that's a really cool job to have.
It's a fun gig.
You can just basically look at the horizon and say, look what's coming, and set those sort of parameters. Say, look, let's start here early. That must be something on.
Personally, like this is just a part of what I've always done. It's a part of what got me into entrepreneurship and founding in the first place. Like recognizing that, stochastic analysis and being able to see around corners, that's a thing that I just kind of do for fun. And then at some point I realized not everyone does that for fun. So it's like, I should probably make a job out of this somehow. So there's definitely that component in terms of what I bring to it. I think the fun part about that as well is it's not just me. Like I'm listening to this incredible community that we've got, to the board members that we talked about before, the internal team, understanding the limits of technology, where it's up to, where it's going to go next. Like there's all of these. It really does take a crowd in that sense as well. That forms a lot of how I try to be good at that job. And it's a part of why I'm still doing it 12 years later, because it's a lot of fun. It's actually kind of rewarding as a gig in that sense.
Well, I want to dive into that, but I suppose before we finish, just on the recent raise, what's a good call to action, both from the crowd itself, like you want to get more into the community,
for sure,
but then also the number of new clients that you had on last year. I won't throw the number because I'll get it wrong, but it's I
think
a lot.
I think it was 200 new from the
so 200 new clients. You obviously want more clients as well. And I've discussed with you and Dave in terms of how you onboard clients as well. So maybe the two calls to action. Maybe to enterprise first.
I'll do that.
To a CISO in the audience. What's on offer from Bugcrowd?
Yeah, so specifically, if you're thinking about vulnerability disclosure programs, so the whole idea of neighborhood watch for the internet, we're at a point now where a lot of the drivers for adoption of that approach to be able to hear from the outside if something's insecure or broken, that's actually being driven by policy now. So it used to be a good idea that the cool kids do. And I think policy and consensus kind of caught up to the point where it's like, no, this is just a part of being on the internet now.
Yep.
So if you're not doing that yet, you need to prepare for that. Because if you don't, you're probably going to have someone walk in and say, hey, your thing's busted. And you're not going to be ready for that, which is not ideal. We can obviously help with that. And I think with VDP just in general, I've banged the drum on that for a long time because I actually think that's how the internet should work. It's gradually evolving to reflect that, and I think that's a phenomena that people should be aware of and start to get proactive about. So I'll get off my soapbox on that one because I can get a little preachy when it comes to that one.
Comes back to your core though, right?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, you can see where that comes from. So bug bounty and pen test, asking the question am I getting return on investment? I've been spending all this money on getting this feedback from people over the years. Am I safer?
Yeah.
If I get breached and I get called to the mat to explain what I've done to protect my shareholders and my users, am I at that point going to be able to say I did everything possible and I spent money well? Asking that question, and if you can't, without hesitating too much, say yes to that, then you should give us a call, because that's really what we've tried to focus on delivering to customers. It's how do we create an advantage that's better than everything that people are doing right now. So yeah, VDP, bug bounty, pen testing. We also do a lot around attack surface management. So the whole idea of it's 11 p.m. Do you know where your stuff is on the internet? That's a hard question to answer, and we can help people answer that question.
Well, that's the end result, I suppose, of doing all the other things.
It varies by company. I think for some organizations, they kind of realize they need to do that after the fact. Others are proactive about it. It's a generically hard problem to solve, and I think people are catching on to that, and that's definitely something that we can help with. And
the crowd itself, you obviously need some new people.
Yeah, bugcrowd.com/sign up, I think it is, or try-bugcrowd. If you just go to the website, you'll see it's obvious where to go to sign up, and just do it. If you're interested in, if you're already in security and wanting to diversify how you apply your skills, you want to earn extra money, if you're thinking about this through the lens of entrepreneurship instead of just being a salaried employee, that's a lot of where the people that join the platform kind of come from. It's right there. All you got to do is sign up, and then you can start looking around for the things that you're best at from there, and then we'll learn over time what you're good at and start to connect you to things that actually maximize your return on investment for time. So,
and again, that's also the way it should kind of be, given cybersecurity has so many different skill sets and requirements.
It's pretty much how the bad guys do it and what's making them successful. So part of what we've tried to do is kind of reflect the economics and the resourcing model that's making the adversary successful, and try to build a white hat version of it. So yeah, engaging with that's as simple as signing up. The other thing that we've got there is Bugcrowd University. So there's a lot of training material that we've developed and continue to develop today on people that are intrigued by AI. What does that even mean? How do I get started? We can actually help you with either up-leveling where you're at right now or getting started if that's where you're up to.
And the business is global. We've spoken to Dave in the US and here in Australia. And I think you've got a VP in Europe, Middle East. So you're truly global now. So there's no sort of boundary.
Yeah, we're not in the Silicon Valley sandpit anymore. There was definitely a few years where we were, but we worked pretty hard to bust out of that quite quickly, because it is a global problem and we do have a global solution. So yeah, I agree with that.
Well, that might take us back to Silicon Valley. And how does a Sydney boy end up getting into Silicon Valley? And I think you're living in Chicago now?
No, in San Francisco.
Okay, San Fran.
That's home, yeah.
All right, but you're 42.
Yep.
And it's good to see you back here at home.
It's good to be back.
But one of the questions I had to you is how are you still involved with the business? How have you not changed? You've been able to adapt out of that co-founder and running the business role to the chief strategy officer. But how's the personal journey been? Because you still look well. You look good.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You haven't gone grey. I think 12 years ago.
Oh, there's a few in there. I think the red hides them pretty well. But no, that's a really good question. I mean, it's been, I think the thing, I talk to a lot of founders about this, because the thing that ultimately for me it still comes back to is this idea of getting irrationally annoyed about a problem that I think I can solve. And those two problems were changing the operating environment for people that hack in good faith and creating an economic advantage for defenders against adversaries. Those were the right things to work on. I still have like 100% conviction and commitment to seeing as much of that through as I possibly can in my own capacity. And now, there's a team to work with that are better at a bunch of stuff than I am, in terms of their own domains. And I get to still be involved in terms of being the guy that wrote on the napkin that time. So there's this kind of balancing act there. And the journey of it is definitely, there's a lot of learning that comes along the way. Swings and roundabouts, and there are a few grey hairs. But I think, where we're at this point in time, it's incredibly rewarding to see the efforts of everyone who's been a part of the journey up to this point kind of get acknowledged by this financing, and then be in a position where we can actually take it forward and have it grow and more into some of the stuff I saw back in the day.
But there's not a lot of Australian cybersecurity entrepreneurs that have, one, the longevity, and two, getting to this level. Some have sold out earlier. I'm here thinking of a couple of other guys that started, and they're kind of your vintage as well. Maybe take us back to sort of the university though. Where did you come out of? Because why are you the only one? There wasn't a group out of uni. You've just kind of been there on your own. From reflection from me, where did you come from out of uni? And,
for sure.
Again, what's made you different?
Wow. You probably need to ask my mum and dad that.
Okay.
Because they'll give you the really proud answer. No.
We'll need to do some background.
I'm stalling for time because I'm trying to compose an answer to that. Look, I did 6 weeks of a science degree before I dropped out.
Right.
So I was hacking all through high school, never breaking the law, Your Honour.
Or never getting caught.
Never breaking the law. And then coming out of high school, I was accepted to do nuclear medicine, and when I started university, I was loving it, but there was this kind of nagging sense of the only reason that I'm doing this is because that's what I was told I should do next, and I couldn't kind of connect the purpose to what I was learning at the time, so I dropped out. And essentially almost tripped over into a network engineering apprenticeship at that point in time. And that's when I started hacking things for customers for pay and realized that was an actual thing. It's like, oh, okay, I get to think like a criminal but not be one.
Yeah.
This is cool.
Yeah.
And that was sort of really my kind of origin story into security as a career. In terms of what makes me, I think one of the things that's a little bit unique about my backstory is that I've done the technical side. I've done sales for 4 years, like solution design, full kind of business development, end to end here in Sydney. So I've kind of seen both ends of what it takes to make this work. Like, to me as a technologist, I love geeking out on solutions, but as a salesperson, I'm also aware that if that solution never gets connected to where the problem is, it might as well not exist.
Yeah.
Right. And that's always been a part of what's informed how I kind of think about things as a founder. There's a bunch of other stuff. Like I try to work with all the brains I can borrow to get a thing done. But when I'm convicted about a thing, people know.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's usually because I'm right.
It sounds like you're a self-learner
kind of
as well.
Like you,
again, as a hacker, you need to do the investigation yourself, right? You can't go do a quick course and go, okay, got it now. You need to learn it on your own, and you learn it in a unique way. Do you think, hence why you've been able to come up with that? At the time, what was unique?
There's definitely, and actually I talked to a lot of cybersecurity founders that come out of self-identifying as a hacker and working in whatever capacity that means for them. I do think that's part of it, because the default to me, what makes a hacker is that if you get given something, your immediate instinct is to tip it upside down and see what falls out.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, okay, I understand what you think this is for, but I want to know what I can do with it. And there's a curiosity and a tenacity that comes with that I've just always had that.
Yeah.
That's just always been a part of how I operate. So.
Well, that definitely seems to be unique amongst the hacker community, white hat or black hat.
But there's definitely some crossovers into founders as well. And I think the role as an entrepreneur, especially in the early stages, like you start here, you want to get there, you've got a limited set of things to work with, and you've got all these things trying to stop you, and your job is to create a path, which is very similar to when you're attacking a network.
Yeah.
Right. So like the kind of the core creative wiring, I think, and that core kind of drive to get to the outcome, there's a lot of similarities between the two. They're not the same. It's different domains, but there's some patterns there that I've spent a lot of time thinking about over the years, for sure.
I think it's also unique just because it's cybersecurity. So there's a lot of other entrepreneurs in different sectors, but cybersecurity in itself is a very unique industry with interesting skill sets along the way and mindsets.
And it's confusing too. I do think kind of what I said before about the sales experience and the marketing experience. Like I view cybersecurity defense is fundamentally like a marketing, a design, and an economics problem, right? It's a marketing problem because it needs to be obvious, otherwise you won't do it.
Yeah.
It's a design problem because it needs to be easy, otherwise you won't do it. You'll just do the thing that you were doing anyway. And it's an economics problem because you could always be trading off the time and effort you put into making yourself more secure against other things. Those are all business concepts. Like you could take them and make them engineering concepts as well, but to me that's more about how you communicate than it is like what you solve at the bits and bytes level. And I don't think a lot of technologists miss that part. They just think it's about the solution. It's like, I mean, sort of, but no, it's not.
Well, no, you're absolutely right. Design and economics comes into play. Yeah. Maybe what's a bit of advice that you would provide, and we could go anywhere. One, just those that are starting out, entrepreneurs. I would even say, what advice would you provide for sort of companies raising money and adapting their strategy?
Yep.
Because again, particularly as that founding entrepreneur, it's quite a unique perspective that you have. What advice would you provide to anyone who you think needs that advice, that you provide that best? Because again, there'll be people watching who are just starting out.
Yeah, that's
this is really cool because it's cyber.
I'm pondering that one because I'm trying to think about the angle that you got there, because it's a really good one. I think for me, and this is something that I actually do share a lot, it's about surrounding yourself with people who've done what you want to do, and ideally, gone further than that. Humbling yourself enough to ask them really stupid questions that you'll feel uncomfortable asking them, because the expectation is you're the founder, you know everything. It's like, no, we don't. Like that's the whole point. We're creating something out of total chaos here, and like we need some help with that, right? And like the last part, which I think is really important, is actually learning how to ignore 90% of what you get told. Because like with mentors, you're not handing them the steering wheel. You're trying to learn from what helped them do their thing that you can then appropriate into how you execute. If you just take all of the advice and run with it, then all of a sudden it's their vision, not yours. Yeah. So like that to me is actually probably the hardest part. It's definitely the part I've seen folks struggle with most, and that I've had to like learn how to get better at, as we've done the last 12 years. Yeah. So I think that's probably the big one. And then the other thing would just be do it now. Like there's never a good time. Yeah, you got to take one step. There is never a good time.
Start of the way. But I think, as you say, the humbling aspect, we talked about the team that you brought around you. There's some pretty impressive resumes around there.
It's humbling.
And
getting to work with people.
It's not so much swallowing your pride, but at least go, wow, okay, I'm not the smartest person in the room. Yeah. I'm sure that's not the case all the time. But
look, there's certain things where I am, and I think that's actually a part of what I sort of believe humility to be. It's like these three things, if we go to the mat, I'm going to win because I'm world class. But then there's everything else. And that's where you're going to be the smartest guy in the room, and that's why I'm in the right room.
Absolutely. But I was going to say, a lot of entrepreneurs do struggle to step back. Yeah. And again, what I see is you've not necessarily stood back, but you've adapted to the role that best suits you. And I think that's really quite impressive.
With that as well, like full credit goes to Dave. And to the team that have come in, because I think managing that's an inherently potentially awkward interaction to manage in his position. And he's been phenomenal. Like we both went into that eyes open, and like that's been a part of what I've really enjoyed about the collaboration between him and I. But I think as the CEO, he's actually got the harder end of that deal. Yeah. So to give straight up, like he's got full credit where it's due there for actually being able to execute on that, because it's not an easy thing to do. Yeah. Most founders do peace out after a year or two from transition, and the main reason I haven't is, as I said before, it's a phenomenal opportunity that's a lot of fun to work on, and I get to work with a world-class team. So.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, that's twice I'm going to quote you on that particular one on the team. I suppose to finish off, we're going to be doing some work with Bugcrowd this year, which is really exciting. We're not even too sure on how we're going to frame it just yet.
Yep.
But the idea, we're going to be doing a bunch of interviews with Hack the Hackers. So we're going to be doing a regular series with some hackers, and also a CISO sort of series interviewing Chief Information Security Officers.
Excellent.
And with Bugcrowd's CISO, Nick.
Yep.
What would you be looking for out of a series like that? Because again, I think we're going to be talking pretty much what we just talked about today is the hacker community and then the enterprise community and bringing them together to solve problems.
That last part would be, the biggest thing. Like the most, when you think about, so I've got a talk that I give called The Unlikely Romance. So this kind of relationship between the hacker community and defenders and CISOs. Because if you look at it through the lens of history, it's like, you guys shouldn't really get along. This is like dogs and cats living together in that sense. And the reality is that there's a lot of sense behind it, and it's actually quite powerful if you can get, those different groups kind of peeking over the fence and trying to understand each other better. So whatever can reinforce that, I think is a phenomenal thing. It's one of the reasons why when we do events and we get hackers and CISOs into the same room together, they're so incredible because they just don't normally hang out.
Yeah. And
they learn so much from each other. They both walk away. It's not just the CISOs, it's the hackers as well, understanding like how hard it is to run a business, right?
Yes.
Like that's valuable too. So this whole idea of the cross-pollination, I think, is really important there. And then just in general, demystifying the whole thing. You know what I mean? I think like a CISO is almost as much of a mythical unicorn at this point in time as a hacker was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It's like, what do they even do?
Yeah.
Like, what are the hardest things for them? Like, what are they going to bed thinking about? And obviously on the hacker side, that story still needs to be told. So,
and I think they're both evolving at the same time
100%,
as well, as everyone is in sort of a new era that we're in.
As I think they always will. This comes back to kind of the founding thesis of Bugcrowd. Like, in 5 years' time, we're going to be talking about a technology stack that we're not even thinking about right now.
Yeah.
In the same way that, like, I didn't expect to be talking about AI in 2023. I knew it was coming over the hill, but the way that it hit, like, that was, oh, okay, we're doing that now.
Yeah.
So, the role of the hacker in that, what that means, how they're effective, and then the role of the CISO in terms of what they're trying to defend, those things are constantly evolutionary, and they're right at the very bleeding edge. So I think there's some really cool stories you can get from that.
I think it's not just the stories as well. I think we'll try to get some learning outcomes as we go. So getting those insights from hackers and CISOs early, getting the audience feedback, getting them to sort of ask some questions along the way may well guide us. So like I said, we don't know quite how we're going to frame it just yet, but it's a great exercise.
I think the bones of the idea are fantastic. I think that's exactly, it's like, what are we learning on the very front edge of all of this, and then how can we cross-pollinate that, and then how can we bring other people into those conversations so they can learn too? I think that's a really good goal.
Great. Well, we'll definitely be working closely with Bugcrowd on the format of who we speak to as well. Sure. But Casey, look, thank you so much today. We could go on for another few hours.
There's a lot to cover, but I think we've covered it. Appreciate it.
I feel like I need to talk to your mother though, in terms of just backing us up, in terms of getting that background.
I'll give her a heads up.
And I like the way, I think you just blushed just then. But anyway,
just a tiny bit.
Thank you, Casey, so much. Look, to the audience, we're going to split these off into three. So if you've been able to stay with us for the whole session, hopefully you've enjoyed that discussion. But Casey Ellis, the Chief Strategy Officer with Bugcrowd, thank you very much for joining us on our Tech and Sec Weekly. Thank you.